Okay, so guys, until I could figure it out, I'm trying to mute everybody, and I don't know how to do it for some reason this time. I did it before, so oh, there we go. I'm going to mute all, and then I got to find my cohort, and you're unmuted, right, Jeff? Yep.
Yep, I just unmuted.
Okay, that seemed to work. So welcome everybody to the second set of lead pilot meetings. You know, I see several of you have been involved in the work that led up to this, including Beav that's on here. So thank you, Beav, for all your work. And I want to introduce actually, as far as I know, our first ever real standardization officer. We've had a lead check pilot in Ranger, and Ranger said, hey, you know, pick Jeff. Well, Jeff has a tremendous experience in standardization and as a pilot, and is a check pilot, both for us and for NATA. And we put him through the process. There's a process that you have to go through to name a standardization officer, which includes vetting all the current check pilots. And he was unanimously approved by them. And then it goes to the board of directors, and they unanimously voted to name Jeff. And Jeff and I have probably been working closer together than anyone else on all this stuff. But I mentioned Beav because Beav's been involved with some of this also and kind of helping us think this through. The purpose of the meeting is not just a standard lead pilot meeting, but hopefully you guys can see my agenda here. You know, we want to address some concerns that we're seeing, not particularly in RPA, but also in RPA, but in all the signatories. So we're, you know, I think Jeff will talk to you about that. We're working closely with some of the other signatories as well. We're seeing carded pilots who have poor skills. And we really want to make sure that everyone understands that this card, although it has a specific purpose for getting you to fly in waivered airspace, Jeff will talk about that, it really means something to the rest of us when you show us a card. It means, you know, you have a certain skill level, or you did at one point, and I think that's important to discuss. We see people coming to check rides for a check ride to a check pilot that really are not prepared necessarily well, and they're supposed to come from you as a lead pilot ready to hopefully pass that check ride. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Evidence of lack of flight leader job knowledge and leadership attitude and skills. Well, this isn't poking at anybody in particular. We just want, because of standardization, to bring all that up, okay? And have us all understand, what is my responsibility when I do a check ride? We're seeing invalid check rides because the paperwork isn't being done right. We have a new formation credential review program that Linebaugh will talk about. And then the meetings are actually sponsored. So this is the fun part, by Lift Aviation. Some of them you know Lift Aviation, and they are donating their awesome knee boards that we will give out 10 of them to all the participants in the 3 meetings at the end. So there's going to be a survey that was already sent out to you. So after the meeting, complete it. If you did the survey, you'll be in for the drawing. So with that, as far as the SOPs for the meeting, you are welcome to interrupt me, interrupt Jeff, and just unmute yourself. So if we see you waving and talking and you're still muted, we can't hear you. So raise your hand or unmute yourself and go ahead and talk, and we're happy to take questions. And then we'll save enough time at the end for issues or questions that come up. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Linebaugh.
Thanks, Gil. See a lot of familiar faces. Hey guys, if I don't know you, I look forward to meeting you guys and line with everybody. I am going to pop up a PowerPoint and share that with you, and we'll get on the way. Okay. All right, that should get us going. Here's what we're going to talk about. Six topics. Talk about the lead pilot and how important we consider you to be to this organization. Talk about the STAMP program a little bit. Talk about it, recent changes, lead pilot job review. We're going to talk about just some of the things that are very important for you guys to accomplish. We'll talk about emphasis areas for 2021, and we'll leave it up to questions and answers at the end. First of all, I will say that I'm lucky to be involved in several formation organizations, like Gil mentioned, NATA, Trayron. The T-34 guy has been doing some work with them. As far as I'm concerned, we have the best formation training organization civilian in the world. And the whole idea is to try and make us all better. The lead pilot, I really don't think has been emphasized enough in our organization as just the backbone of our training program. So I want to try and bring that into focus for us and talk about some of the important things that you guys are doing for our organization. Just briefly going through, this is all this stuff that you guys have to do on a day-to-day basis as a lead pilot. And it's recognized as being super important. The FAST program responsibilities, in particular, proficiency reports and recommending guides for pilots. That is the most important element of our training program right there. So you guys are the important thing. You're going to hear me say that over and over again as we go through the meeting. We're going to talk about several things to try and make your job easier. And since coming on as a standardization officer, we've done several things to try and do that. And I will say that I want to encourage you to give us feedback. If there's things that you need improvement on, you see things that out in the field that needs to be changed, then I encourage you, please, to bring that forward to me. We've got the standardization officer, that's me. We've put together a standardization advisory committee. That's 6 of our most experienced check pilots that I will go to for advice and for critique for any changes that we go forward with. This is not just a one-man show. The check pilots, yes, an integral part of our standardization program. The lead pilots, notice that you're in there. That is, we want to have you be our eyes and ears for what's going on out in the organization. And I put in parentheses other signatories as part of our standardization program, because as Gil mentioned, we've got a great rapport with several of the other signatories right now to try and bring standardization between organizations. I am sure that you've probably seen in recent years that with fuel prices, when they spiked, the number of clinics went down, and all of a sudden we get other signatory airplanes starting to show up at our events. So we're gonna continue to see that. We're gonna have other T-34s. We're gonna have, of course, the Epsilons are coming on board with us. We're gonna have RVs. We're gonna have other organizations, airplanes showing up at our clinics wanting to participate, primarily because we do things right and they recognize that. So we're trying to promote a lot of standardization between the organizations, and I think that'll be a huge benefit for all of us going forward. There's my contact information. If you need to get a hold of me, my phone number is on there, my email. Please contact me any point, anytime. A little bit of history. If you don't know me, yes, I've been in the RPA since before it was the RPA, when it was the Act Pilot Association over 20 years ago. I owned a CJ6 for a number of years. Went through a pretty extensive restoration on that. And I've stayed in the organization since then. So for 20 years, I've been in the background. Mike Felucci and I put together the original formation manual that has gone through a number of changes over the years, but I'm happy to be here, happy to help you guys, happy to go forward. Here's some of the recent changes that we've tried to implement. Go through each one just a little bit of detail, and then we're going to go into more detail on some of the new guides that we've got and forms as we go on. First of all, the patched IP program. If you're a patched IP, guess what? Not anymore. We have discontinued that program. I was one of the instigators of that program years ago, and we just found that it wasn't practical. So we have discontinued the program. That does not mean that you guys are not instructors anymore. As a matter of fact, that's totally the opposite. We want to encourage you and let you know that you are the instructors in this program. How we pick instructors, backseat instructors for clinics is now covered in the RPA formation credential review, in the new formation clinic guide, which we put together. And that's a huge help for anybody that's thinking about putting on a clinic. It goes through a great deal about how to put on a clinic, who to contact, how to make all the arrangements to have a successful clinic. One of the key components of that is selection of instructors and check pilots to do the training during the clinic. So yes, but the IP program has been discontinued. However, as leads, we're all instructors, and we will be selecting instructors to do backseat training at the clinics. The clinic organizers will do that. Something else that's a fairly recent document that lives on our website is the RPA Formation Credential Review Program. And if you're not familiar with that, it'd be a good thing for you to go and look at on our website. The idea of this came from one of our signatories in FAST when they were starting to encounter guys that frankly didn't have the skill or the ability to have the skill to maintain their credentials. And it gave a formal method of looking at a guy with the emphasis of training to proficiency. And if the guy can't get back to proficiency, then having a way to remove the credentials for their safety and for the safety of all others. So if you haven't looked at that, then that might be a good thing to go for. A couple other things that we put together, a new FPR form that was done before I came on as a standardization officer. It's a huge help to us. It'll streamline our FPRs going forward. We have put together a guide on how to fill out the FPRs, and we've come up with a new job aid for lead pilots that should pretty much cover 90% of what you as a lead have to do. We'll cover that as we go forward. Like I said, here we're going to go just through some of the salient points of being a lead. Not that you guys don't know your job, but we're going to just go through a quick review to highlight the important things that you're doing. Lead pilot kit bag. If you've been around for a while and you were around some of our notorious check pilots, they expected anybody coming to a check ride with all of this stuff, all the FAST formation manuals and documents. And this is a pitch for you. If, when you're going to a clinic, when you're instructing, when you're getting together with a bunch of guys, boy, I tell you what, this is a good list of things for you to be able to have with you. And in this day and age with the iPads, it's pretty easy to just download these documents in PDF form and have them for your reference. Gone is the day when we expect guys to just off the cuff come up with ways they think they should be doing things. We'd like to get everybody back to the source documents, back to the formation manual. If a question comes up, have that thing available so that you can reference it going forward. Talk about instruction just really briefly. This is right out of the practical test guides, talks about how important our instructors are, and that is you, the leads, to our national formation program. Additional training, decertification, recommending pilots and applicants for check rides. Of course, we've got tabletop ground instructional skills, backseat instructional skills, but also error recognition analysis, briefing, debriefing skills. Those are critical skill sets that you as leads, we expect you to have. Of course, you're going to be analyzing why things happen, how to fix it. That should be the focus of your briefing and debriefing. This is a formation training record, which the RPA uses. They are available on the website. When you're doing formation training, it's important to try and keep consistency and continuity for a guy. And this is a way to do it so that we know what maneuvers he's done well in the past. So going forward, you know what to emphasize. Debriefing basics, just a couple of things on that. Try and keep things positive. When you're debriefing, try and keep it in order so that it makes sense to guys when they're going through. I've seen lately kind of a trend, and I don't know if it's a local thing or what, but where guys, the lead gets up and just says, okay, you know, from the back, what have you got? And there's no real organization if you just start having each pilot come up with their random things that they think they saw on the flight. So trying to keep the lead in charge of the debrief, I think, is an effective way to keep things going. And of course, at the end, of course, you do want, and during the middle, throughout the debrief, of course, you get the inputs from for different pilots, but have the lead be the guy that's actually keeping things going. Okay, so one of our important jobs is to fill out formation proficiency reports. Let's talk about that for a few minutes. We've got the old form, which is an RPA form, shows the maneuvers, talks about the pilot's names, and this form we can still use to the end of the year. The new simplified form looks like this. And I think that we will see that it is going to be well accepted and loved by the lead pilots because of its simplicity. If you're going to endorse somebody, then it's a simple thing. You use one form for each pilot that you're endorsing. Put their name, their information, your name, your information, fill it out in the PDF and send it in. No need to print it out, no need to scan it. It's just fillable as a PDF, very easy to submit. If you notice on the form itself, it has the requirements for conducting an FPR. Of course, the most important thing is that for a lead pilot to endorse somebody as proficient, they have to be current on the first place. So as a lead, when you're conducting an FPR, I encourage you to have the guy pull out his formation card and make sure that he is in fact current. We've had a couple of situations lately where we got an FPR for a guy that wasn't even current, hadn't turned in an FPR for 2 years. And of course, that requires a check ride from a check pilot. Doesn't require a rec ride, but just a check ride from a check pilot to reestablish their currency. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the other requirements as we go through the lead check pilot job aid going forward. Any questions on the new FPR form before we keep going? All right, here we go. Here's the FPR guide. This is just a dialogue.
This is Opie. I'm going to say something on the old form, or the new form.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, the old form had a bunch of check blocks and stuff, which required an active involvement by the lead to say that they did a proper evaluation ride. The new form just has a list of stuff. So you lead pilots need to read that form before you sign it. I'm not going to check that you did all that. I'm not going to call you and say, did you do all this stuff? We need to trust you guys. And so the point is, all those little check blocks that we had on the old form, a big error format, which the FAA would not accept if we had to produce documentation for them. New form prevents that clerical error, but for a safety point of view, please, please, please read that and do that.
Thanks, Opie. Awesome. By the way, here's a plug. He does a ton of work for our organization. How many forms do you go through in a year, for goodness sakes?
It's a lot of forms, but since we started that new form, the error rate has dropped significantly. I don't know how many of those are clerical error rates versus not doing a proper ride. Again, I can't be your babysitter. I'm just a record keeper, simply and factually a record keeper. And my job will become extremely important in the event of a mishap, which hopefully we never have to do. But if we have to produce documents for the FAA, we need to be able to do a paper trail back to how we got to where we were. Because again, the FAA is letting us police ourselves. Am I correct in that?
I have
Absolutely.
a question on that. So if you've got someone from the T-34 Association that's signing a form, the FPR form, who's not an RPA member, but okay, let me rephrase that. If I have someone give me a check right,
I tell you what, Mike, I will cover that just momentarily here for you.
roger that.
I'll give you both scenarios. But
Okay.
that's a really great question, and going forward, we're going to see more and more of that. Opie, anything else to add? All right, and I second his plea, because this does take a lot of responsibility on the lead to make sure that, yes, when you sign that, you're signing off that this guy is going to be safe and proficient, meets the practical test guide standards to be safe in an air show environment for the entire next year.
And you're gonna repeat that with a straight face to the Fed.
Absolutely. Yes, there is a list of the maneuvers that we expect. And if you look at this FPR guide, I know this is an eye test for you. I don't intend for you to read this RPA FPR guide, but it does list the maneuvers that we consider to be required in order for you to demonstrate, for a guy to demonstrate proficiency on an FPR flight. There's another restriction that we've added to that, and that is that the FPR form has to be turned in within 30 days of the flight. And again, that's to try and encourage guys to not go back, in December and say, oh God, I flew with the guy at Oshkosh, I can get him to sign me off on FPR, for this year. We want you guys to specifically do a flight in particular to establish currency. This is not something that you're gonna, you just go do a flyby of a school or something, come back and you sign a guy off because he was able to fly straight and level for 20 minutes while you're on a flyby. There's particular maneuvers. We want to make sure that we are establishing proficiency in accordance with the FAST Practical Test Guide. And to go into that just a little bit more, we'll talk about the lead. For you in particular, we are requiring both lead and wing proficiency. So when you go and do your lead FPR for the year, first of all, of course, it has to be another lead or a check pilot that signs you off. And so we will expect there to be a lead change during that flight so that you demonstrate both lead and wing proficiency during that flight. And we expect you to demonstrate proficiency in all the maneuvers and in both the lead and the wing position.
Can I make sure that we understand this? It can be in two different flights, but when I see the FPR, I'm going to presume that a lead has done both. And that means that same lead that signed him off saw him do both.
Awesome. Thanks for the clarification, Opie. That's absolutely true.
Yeah, I got a quick question.
Okay.
A little bit of confusion for me. So on a FPR flight, it's got to be a 4-ship. But do all 4? Does there have to be a carded person in all 4 airplanes in the flight? Or
Thank you. Absolutely. You know what? What a great lead-in. Thank you very much. I'm going to cover that right now. This is the frequently asked questions portion of the FPR guide. And the top one is exactly what you're talking about. Does a guy have to be FAST qualified or current to participate in the FPR flight? And we are totally leaving that up to the lead to make that determination. If it's a guy that's, safe and proficient and you want him in that FPR flight to fill out the 4-ship and he's not a fast guy, that's totally up to the lead's discretion. However, the guy that's getting the FPR, of course, does have to be FAST qualified and current in order to get the FPR filled out. And to go with Mike's question, what if the guy that is endorsing an RPA member is not with the RPA, a T34 association lead? Can we get a T34 association lead to fill out an FPR for an RPA member? And the answer is yes, absolutely. Now, here's the deal. We expect them to use our RPA form so that Opie doesn't have to discern, a T34 form. It has to be an RPA form. And to make Opie's job easy, we expect you to take a picture of that lead pilot's credential and submit it with the form, so that Opie doesn't have to run to the T34 Association every time somebody from another signatory fills out an FPR. That's done for him. So that's the way we want to see that done. The other way around, can you as an RPA lead fill out an FPR for a non-RPA member? Yes, that's yes. T34 guy comes to you and he wants you to sign off an FPR for him? Absolutely. Can you use the RPA form? Well, that's up to that signatory. And I would have that member that's a non-RPA guy check with them and see if they want it filled out on their signatory's form, the fast generic form, or whether our form would suffice. But that's not our bailiwick. That's them. That's their signatory business. And as far as we're concerned, we're doing a service for them, but as far as the records trail for them, it's up to them. Can I, as a lead, endorse myself? Of course not. That's nice try, but no. Got to have another leader, check pilot, do it. Notice that we have put down here, if all the required maneuvers couldn't be demonstrated or flown, what happens? Well, the FPR flight is incomplete. You can do it on another day. You endorsing that pilot on that particular day says that on that date, on that flight, you completed all the requirements for the FPR.
I'd like to add to that if I could. And
Sure.
I think what you're saying, and this is what I would propose, if it's not what you're saying, we go and do a flyby, a lot of straight and level. You've demonstrated nice wing stuff. Then on another day, you go out, do a bunch of rejoins and the other maneuvers, you're good to go. You can do more than one flight. I only want the date for the last flight.
Absolutely.
Does that work? That works?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
And so I'll only see one form. I won't know that you did it on more than one flight. I don't care. As long as all the maneuvers were flown, it's your signature, your integrity, and I'm good with that.
Perfect. You're the man, Opie. Thank you for the clarification. All right, anything else going forward? We'll hit a little bit more of it on going forward too, but that should take care of most stuff. Let's talk about recommendation rides. That's the next thing that big job responsibility that you guys have. Yes, we've seen some issues where guys come to a check ride and they're not really fully prepared. Again, this is a huge responsibility. The lead is going to determine if a guy is ready to go to a check ride. The check pilot, all the check pilot's doing is validating, verifying that the training has been done. Yes, in fact, this guy is a safe pilot. All the training, everything that leads up to it is done by the lead pilot. The lead is signing off at the very end that they're recommending him for a check ride. And just like the FPR, not all items have to be done on the quote unquote rec ride. If you fly with a guy 5 rides and you didn't see necessarily every maneuver on the last flight, but you know that he's demonstrated proficiency on whatever it is on that flight, on previous flights, then and you can recommend him. It doesn't have to be everything on that last flight, but you're verifying that the guy is in fact ready to go. One of the items that we've seen kind of slighted was the oral phase. Make sure that when you send this guy to the check ride, that he knows what is expected on the check ride, which is, we're gonna sit down and we're gonna go through the practical test guide, and there's an oral phase. We're gonna go step by step through and make sure that the guy is familiar with everything, because we won't do necessarily everything on the check ride. We wanna make sure that he is familiar with things that we won't see on the check ride, that maybe he may encounter. For instance, all the hand signals. Something else that is a recent emphasis item is fast airshow operations. We're required as check pilots now, and you should require your guy to know how to operate in an airshow environment. That's why we do these fast check rides. Yes, it's a demonstration that you've met a level of proficiency, but also it should be a demonstration that you're familiar with airshow operations, the FAA 8900 document, airshow lines, air bosses, briefings, all that. So make sure that you're properly preparing a guy so that when he goes to the check ride, he's dressed for success. There's the RPA check form right now. One of the things that we will work on right after the first year is trying to make this a little bit more streamlined. It will probably look more like the FPR form going forward. More on that soon. And there, of course, is the check form. That also we're going to work on trying to streamline, make sure that the required maneuvers are known so that going forward, whether it's a wing check or a lead check, that we know exactly what is required on the check ride.
And again, Jeff, and Gil as well, I'm sure, those blocks at the top, they're easily missed. It's a clerical error, I'm sure, most of the time. So when you develop the new form, if we could streamline the clerical errors, it simplifies the job. Right now, I'm forwarding the forms to you guys, and you're reviewing them again, and you'll back me up, I know. Just missing those check blocks at the top is an annoyance at best, and at worst, the FAA will interpret that as not meeting the requirements.
Yeah, we've had a couple situations just in clinics this last year where we had to reaccomplish check rides because they weren't done in accordance with the FAST protocols, which is embarrassing from a check pilot standpoint, and frustrating for guys that have gone through and thought they finished the check ride. So
let me just interject for a second, Jeff, if I may. I mean, this is part of the reason that, you know, we brought Jeff on as standardization officer. You know, how many times has OP sent us forms and we've looked at them and said, hey, you know, we got to make them pilot proof because people can't seem to check off simple boxes. Well, I get it. And that's where we're headed. And part of it is the job guide that you're going to see in a second and that was emailed to you. That, you know, ultimately is going to be on your knee board. So when someone says, hey, I need to do a check ride, all the boxes you need to check are going to be listed.
There you go. Exactly. Thanks for the lead in, Gil. So here is this lead check pilot job aid. Like Gil mentioned, it lives on the website. It's a live document on the RPA website under the library. This is, again, a little bit of an eye check for you, eye test. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through it, though, and try and familiarize you with it and go through some of the requirements as a review. It starts off with lead flight planning considerations, which we all are quite familiar with, but it gives you just a little bit of a checklist about some of the things to think about when you are planning a flight. And of course, we all know that typically when you're doing a training flight, you want to do your homework. You want to figure out who you're training, what kind of training requirements they have in order to develop the training profile. Talk about, you know, pilot selection considerations, aircraft considerations, dissimilar types, airspeeds, power settings, fuel, bearing lines. If you're going and flying a training flight with T6s or Epsilons or a Yak 50, you know, nobody's going to, it may be liters, it may be gallons, who knows? So anyways, just some things to think about when you're planning your flight. The formation proficiency report is the next thing that we've listed. And if you can read this, it lists the requirements right here. And again, this is going to be a kneeboard format, front and back. So you should be able to just bring it with you. It'll be a good tool for you to use in addition to the briefing guide. For the formation proficiency report, it says the FPR candidate must be current. If not current, he requires a check ride. And it talks about exactly the maneuvers that are required on the check. The FPR candidate must show proficiency in the following. Talk about brief and debrief for leads. Takeoff can be either an element or an interval. Station keeping, and that means 45 degrees of bank, 20 degrees of pitch, just right, and in accordance with the practical test guide standards. Route, cross-unders, echelon, turns, pitch out, rejoin, extended trail, non-aerobatic extended trail, which we feel is a really important skill set to have for wing pilots and lead pilots when doing check rides. Of course, the lead change will be required if you're doing a lead proficiency report because you've got to demonstrate lead and wing proficiency. And a lead change is kind of a weak area and a dangerous, could be a dangerous iteration if not done correctly. So we'd like to see that. And landing could be either done as a pitch out to land or an element landing. Like it says, leads must be signed off by another lead check, must demonstrate proficiency in both lead and wing. And we're limiting it to no more than 2 lead FPRs on any one flight. In other words, we don't want to see 4 guys out there, 4 leads, doing 4 position changes, going through 4 different sets of maneuvers, all in one flight. We want to see briefing and debriefing skills are an essential part of being a lead, and demonstrating proficiency in that is important. So we want to limit it to just 2, because that means that 1 guy will brief and 1 guy will do the debrief. And the bottom line is that you're certifying on the FPR that the flight was accomplished safely, proficiency, met practical test guide standards for the guys that you're signing off. A huge responsibility. So let's talk about, just for a second, what if a guy doesn't meet your standards, your proficiency standards that are listed in the practical test guide? What do we do then? Anybody have that situation? Well, if he doesn't, if it's just a matter of the guy hasn't flown formation for a few months and he just needs a couple more rejoins in order to get back up to snuff, then we totally encourage you to go out, do the training, come up with a training sortie, put together the pilots needed in order to do that effectively, and then just go reaccomplish the FPR flight. Any questions on that? Now, if a guy is just showing, that there's something going on that, and we're all getting older, if we get to that point where we're not able to do the required maneuvers safely, proficiently, then at some point we may have to use the credential review program. And like I mentioned, that is on the website, and it's something that we can use, a formal program, in order to try and evaluate a guy's credentials, try and get him up to proficiency. And if we can't, then go through the steps in order to fairly judge the guy before we start removing qualifications. But if it's just a guy needing a couple more rejoins in order to get him up to snuff for an FPR, then please just do the training and go for it. Okay, any questions on that? Awesome. Okay, wing pilot, recs and check rides. Again, this goes right through the requirements prior to the flight. You want to verify the guy's qualifications, and that is on the form, right on the rec and the check ride form. You want to make sure that the guy is knowledgeable in the FAST FF&P, the Wing Practical Test Guide, Airshow Ops document, the 8900 document as it applies to our airshow operations, the RPA formation manual, da 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 da. There's a whole long list of things that you want to make sure that he is ready to go. The flight talks about the qualifications, must be in a 4-ship. Candidate must fly as both 2 and 4 and must be proficient in both positions. All members of the flight for the rec ride have to be fast qualified and current. That is different than the FPR flight. On the rec and check ride, they do have to be fast qualified and current in order to be part of the flight.
I would add to that, somebody in each airplane has to be fast qualified and current. Is that correct or not correct?
Absolutely. It could be a backseat instructor serving to make sure that we want a guy to have a level of proficiency so that we're not hosing the guy and making the rec ride.
And that's where I was going with that. And so, yeah, if you got 2 guys, they're both wrecking or checking, the IP can intervene on behalf of the guy doing the maneuver, so we don't waste the ride, because Absolutely. We don't. Yeah, that's what that's about. And so yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. 4 qualified people in 4 airplanes, but you can be checking 2 guys as front seaters, but you just got an IP back there, and he can like coach or whatever, even intervene. So if a guy's doing a rejoin as 4, that 2 doesn't hose him. That's the idea, right?
That's totally the idea. You betcha. And And the instructor, the backseat instructor, will probably have to intervene sooner than he might on another training flight, just to try and, you know, make sure that things are streamlined enough for the guy we don't want to evaluate the guy on the rec or check ride based on somebody else's performance. We want to just look at the candidate and make sure that his performance is good. So yeah, totally acceptable. We're going to use the Wing Practical Test Guide and the RPA Fast Evaluation Form to evaluate the candidate, and it shows the maneuvers that are required. We'll talk about that. And the evaluator cannot give a rec or a check ride to more than one candidate at a time. That's the requirements for the Wing check ride. Now let's go to the next page here really briefly. We're going to go through the, oh, I'm sorry, one more thing on the wing check. The evaluator has to be in the same aircraft as the pilot being evaluated. The only exception to that rule is going to be if it's a single seat airplane. If the guy's flying a Yak 50, then it is up to the evaluating pilot to decide whether or not he can evaluate the guy from another position in the flight. But he has to be in the flight. Can't be a 5-ship with a guy chasing around. Let's go through the lead pilot requirements.
Jeff, I got a question.
Okay.
This is Don Ram. Extended trail, was it on the rec and the check ride and only on the FPR?
No, it'll be on the rec and check ride also.
What do you expect in terms of proficiency on extended trail?
Well, we expect the guy to be able to recognize the need to use lead and lag to stay in position, be able to use it effectively.
Do they have to stay within 200 and 500 feet? Because I never see anybody do that.
Well, I think that that's going to be up to the check pilot to determine.
Okay.
To add to this, I'm also a CFI, not just the records keeper. But if a guy sees that he's at 550, 600, 650 feet, and he's making the appropriate correction, that's what we're really looking for, right?
And I see 1,000, 2,000 feet. You know.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
And that doesn't match what the practical test guide is saying.
Absolutely.
And by the way, I just want to interject for a second here on that last bullet about where you can sit. At the end of the day, if you're not going to be doing, if you're the check pilot, you know, or the recommending pilot, and somebody shows up in a single seater, and you're going to give them a rec ride, it's your responsibility to say, I am willing to do that from the back seat of another airplane, from the front seat of another airplane, or I'm not. That's your job. You get to call it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks, Gil. Okay, let's go through the difference for the lead check. Most of it is exactly the same. The only significant difference is the addition of the lead pilot job responsibilities, which talks about flight planning and pilot selection, accomplishing FPR flights, of course, how to accomplish a rec flight, which we want them to know how to do. It's more than just leading airplanes around. As you know, we want them to bring them into the fold so that they know exactly all the things that we've been talking about here. Air analysis, critique, instruction that they're going to do on every single flight as a lead. Again, the check ride has to be done in a 4-ship. The candidate will lead throughout the flight. It's assumed that he's showing up with a current wing qualification, so he's not having to demonstrate wing proficiency on the check ride itself or the rec ride. Again, same requirements as far as being in the same flight and the same aircraft, except for single seat aircraft, which we talked about. In addition, we want to see on recs and checks some sort of either a breakout, lost comm, lost sight, simulated emergency scenario, because we want to see the guy's situational awareness. We want to have him demonstrate the ability to, when a flight falls apart, get them back together again. And that is an essential skill for a lead pilot. So going forward, we expect that from our candidates. So this lead check pilot job aid, as a review, Bring it with you. It's got all the requirements. It's a one-stop shopping. It should cover 90% of your job as a lead pilot. If you've got questions that pop up that aren't on this, then you're probably going to need to call a check pilot or call me, standardization officer, for some sort of a waiver or some sort of an explanation. Okay, real quickly, let's go over a couple of emphasis items for 2021. This is something that is close to our hearts, the overshoot underrun maneuver. We see it as a pretty consistent weak area on check rides and in our clinics. I would like a commitment from every lead going forward that every training flight that you do for 2021, that you at least discuss either in the pre-brief or the post-brief the proper execution of an overshoot underrun maneuver. Go through the steps, go through it with the guys, talk about how to do it as two, how to do it as lead, where the guy should end up, where he should not end up, and how to safely accomplish the maneuver. We want to emphasize this. We're going to emphasize it on every flight, on every clinic flight going forward. We want to get this so it is just like a go around. So it's not a big deal. It's just another maneuver. One thing I will mention on it before we go on, I've seen, there's a misconception, I think, that an overshoot means being hundreds of feet away from the lead aircraft. And what I would encourage us to rethink is that as a guy coming in at 2, he should not have so much smash that he's going to have to go any further out than, say, about the number 4 echelon position. He should not be above lead, he should not be in front of lead, but he shouldn't have to go much further out than about that position in order to stop and safely get the energy under control before coming back to the inside. Where guys run into problems is when they're a couple hundred feet away from lead. And frankly, I don't think that's an overshoot underrun maneuver. That's a breakout. If you're significantly delaying 3 and 4 coming on board, then that's a breakout. That's not an overshoot. That's a breakout. So we want to emphasize that. We want to talk about that. When the guy gets a couple hundred feet away and then tries to come to the inside, that's where we run into problems, because he ends up having tons of energy and becomes a danger in the flight, and significant delays 3 and 4. So anyways, going forward, we'd like to really emphasize that. For
Hey,
lead,
Jeff?
yes, sir.
Jeff, can you hear me? This is Ryan Patterson. I wanted to add, because this is a great topic that I had some notes to add to bring up for this evening. What we have found out, I fly a lot with Jim Wilson and Bob Graves, who are on this call as well, is that practicing the overshoot actually makes for helps a pilot become better at the rejoins in the end, because they see the fact that they can come in with a lot of smash and they can arrest that smash very quickly. Like you said, you don't want to be more than a couple, 2, 3, you basically want to be not much more than number 4. Right? And when you increase that turn circle, it really knocks that smash out quickly. So we practice that a lot actually on our end. And we feel that helps a new pilot do their rejoins a whole lot better.
Absolutely. And it's a setup to learn how to rejoin the 3 and 4.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Ryan. Breakouts, reassembling flights, like I mentioned, that's an essential lead skill, and we want to emphasize that, especially during lead training and at our clinics. So that's another thing that we're going to emphasize. The other that I want to see is emergency procedures training. That is something that we should be thinking about every single flight. So I implore, let's commit to every single flight, talk about some sort of emergency, whether it's before or after the flight, something so that we get our minds thinking about it. And I've seen different techniques. Guys have got, a spinning wheel of misfortune that'll show, engine failure, different scenarios. I've seen guys put scenarios in a fishbowl and pick one out and talk about it during the maneuver, during the pre-brief, whatever it takes. Just get guys thinking about emergency procedures. I think that's really an important thing. Like I said, we're going to delineate some more guidance on similar aircraft formations. We're going to streamline the rec and check forms going forward. That's something you will see shortly before we really get the flying season going for next year. And I will reemphasize, I strongly believe that RPA is the best formation organization. I think we can only do a better job by just concentrating on the little things. The leads make it. The leads keep us safe. The leads are the ones that make sure that we're being proficient going forward and recommending guys for check rides. It's the most important job, and I thank you guys for your dedication in doing that. I want you to, again, if you could please let me know if there's something that you see that we need to be working on, something that we could make better, please just contact me. I would be more than happy to address any of those things, questions, waivers, any of that stuff. You got my contact information. Again, there it is. Please feel free to contact me. All righty, and I'll leave that up there so you guys can copy it down, and let's just open it up for questions, comments, suggestions.
I'm going to jump right in here, if you don't mind. I saw in the sidebar chat here, Andy Elliott asked a question about checking credentials. Any pilot can check their own credentials. They've always had the ability to do this. You just go onto the website, log in, and at the top right corner of the page, you click on your name, you click pilot profile, and under additional information is your fast stuff. I'm sure there's a way to check your membership data too. I'm not that guy, but every pilot should be able to check their own stuff. Now, other pilots checking other pilots' credentials, we don't have that, and I'll leave that to Gil to see how that's going to be addressed, especially check pilots should probably have admin access to the website. But yeah, please check your own data. You're allowed to do that. If you submitted an FPR in February and you forgot, don't come to me, go look, because I'm going to do exactly what you would do, exactly the same number of keystrokes. And tell your people, please. I feel a lot of data or a lot of emails for that, and it's an easy thing for everyone to be able to do. You can check your own fast currency already.
Awesome. That's a great suggestion, and we will include that in the next meeting for sure, that we make sure we get the word out. At the end of this week, anticipate getting all the questions that have been asked and answering them for guys, so that anybody that was on a particular meeting didn't miss out on the benefit of that. What other questions do we got? Suggestions?
Let me just chime in for 1 second, just following up on this. So I wanted to show you, this is, if you go into the RPA website, there's your name, and you can do this on your phone or on your iPad. This is exactly what Opie was saying. I can click on my profile. Everyone should be able to look at this. Under member profile, additional member information, and additional member data. There's my fast expiration, okay? Because I'm up to date with my FPR.
Good for you, Gil.
Yay, Opie. And everybody should be able to do that and show that to the rec pilot that's going to give you your rec ride, or show them a current card. So the card machine is back in service. We're going to get new cards out for the spring. So if you need one for some reason before then, reach out to our admin, Ziggy, which is admin@flyredstar.org.
Or if it's a true emergency, I don't want to call it an emergency. If it's an urgency, unless you're going to take the ability away, I can print a letter with my signature on it that validates your currency. It's short of a card. It's short of a plastic card.
Hey, Jeff, this is Jim Kilpatrick. I've got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
On the air show operations, we got the oral exam. And I represent, or we have the bandit flight team. We have 10 members. They're all RPA, because VACs and RVs. And we're pretty busy. Before this, we did over 50 events a year for the 3 years prior to COVID. But we do not fly in any waivered airspace. None. We will not go into waivered airspace. We do strictly military events, national anthem flyovers, that kind of stuff. So the air show operations really does not apply to us. And so my question is that an RPA requirement, or is that a formation required for everybody to have a knowledge on that?
Okay, so be real specific here. We are a member of FAST, and FAST's purpose is to provide credentials to the FAA to allow us to fly in waivered airspace. That's the reason that we do this. That's the whole reason we do this. Now, do you have to have a FAST card to go do what you're doing? No. Do you have to have a FAST card to go fly with your buddies on the weekends? No. The only time that it's required is going into waivered airspace. We are doing check rides based on the FAST requirements. And so, yes, we are required right in the FF&P, it says that we have to talk about airshow operations because we are certifying that a guy is safe to go in the airshow environment and operate in that environment.
And that,
now a lot of guys,
that is a new requirement by the FAA. They have added that. It was not there before. It is there now. So if it's a surprise to you, welcome to the 2020 version of FAST.
Okay, I appreciate that.
We've had some discussions, and there is there's a document on the website that says 8,900 ways to get violated, which is 8,900 is referring to the FAA order that the inspectors use in order to evaluate whether or not people are performing to the standards required in FAA waivered airspace. And so I encourage you to look at that. The FAST airshow document that lives on our website is out of date. The new 8,900 document came out at the end of October. I'm in the process of updating that document so that you have the latest, most up-to-date information going forward when you're operating in waivered airspace. Now, so we are certifying guys that they are able to operate in waivered airspace. A lot of people that get FAST cards will never fly in waivered airspace, and that's fine, but it's just a level of, we're demonstrating a level of proficiency and showing up at clinics and showing up at other events, demonstrating, bringing out your FAST card shows that you have met that requirement.
Okay, I appreciate that because I didn't know where it was coming from. And Mike Felucci flies with us a couple of times. He gives the check rides to all my guys. We require a FAST card for us internally because I want to screen. I want everybody to be qualified, and so that we do that. It's an internal requirement for us. So that's why I was asking why, if we had to have the air show operations, we get a new guy coming in, I guess we'll just have to learn it and want to.
Well, I would encourage you to learn it because, believe it or not, that 8,900, it also talks about flight in events, aviation events that are not waivered airspace. Do you need a FAST card to fly in an air show over a stadium? No. However, the FAA still has some requirements, and they're listed in the 8,900. I would strongly encourage you to review the FAST air show operations to make sure that you're meeting the requirements.
Oh, yeah, I've looked at it. I've worked with the FAA guys in Washington, that division on air show flyers when they shut us down many years ago. We met with those people, went over everything, what we do, requirements and all that stuff. So, we do comply with all that. So that's good. Okay, I just want to know why that was added. And why it's okay. It's in there. It's part of life. We'll deal with it.
It's a FAST requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Who else? Anybody?
This is John Beatty.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick clarification. On an FPR ride, for ships, not everybody except the person being evaluated and the person doing the evaluation has to be qualified and correct.
That is correct.
Okay.
And if in some situations, if it is a wing check and you're having a hard time getting 4 guys together, with advance approval, we will allow an FPR for a wing pilot to be done in a 3-ship using a Phantom 2. But that should be an irregularity that requires approval ahead of time.
I just want to make sure we could do an FPR ride where, say, -4 was a wing candidate and we were checking -2.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I got a question about waivered airspace.
Okay.
A lot of people think that officially FAA waivered airspace means air shows. But for example, if we go fly underneath the class Bravo in an area that's restricted, and we call up, the controller and say, we're going to do a, flyby over this stadium, which is inside class Bravo airspace, and they say, okay, or they authorize us a particular flight path and time, is that waivered airspace? I mean, if you look at the FAA form for getting a waiver to do that, they talk about stadiums and things like that in that form. Or are we just talking about air shows where we're allowed to go down to the ground level?
What we're talking about is where an application has been made by an aviation event organizer, and the waivers have been given to rules such as airspeed, cloud clearance, the typical waivers that are obtained when you are conducting an air show. Now, if you're doing a stadium flyover, you have to adhere to the FARs. There is no waiver in effect. You have to adhere to the FARs. And unfortunately, for our experimental aircraft, there are additional requirements in our limitations and our ops limits that we have to adhere to.
Okay.
You betcha.
Hey, Jeff.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Steve Tupper out of Detroit. And I know Ken Glidden's online. If anybody wants to do a sidebar at any point with an LOA holding Air Boss, let me know. Ken, you're either training up for that or you're already at least standard. And if there are other bosses, please raise your hands, and because there's some good questions, interesting questions going on. If you want to know about the World 8900.1, we'd be happy to help.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.
Anybody else? BJ, good to see you, bud. Anybody else got anything? We were hoping to kind of keep this to about.
Let me interject.
You bet.
And you guys think of any more questions before we kick off. We are at a little over an hour, so if anyone needs to go, you're free to do so. I want to say a couple things. One is thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I think this is super important. I'm really proud of the work that Jeff is doing for us as standardization officer. I'm also sharing with you the Navigator Kneeboard. We're going to give away 10 of these, so do participate in these are from Lift Aviation. They've been a great supporters of the RPA. They have helmets. I have one of their helmets. If anyone's interested, ask me about it. We're going to give away Kneeboard, so participate in the survey afterwards because that's important to us, especially to Jeff. I want to emphasize what Jeff is saying. You guys are super important. Your job is super important. Take it as such. And I've said this on the last call. The check pilot is basically there kind of like a DPE where you said, this guy's good to go take him for a check ride. If you send somebody to a check ride and they're not really qualified, or we find out they don't have the hours or something like that, that's going to come back on you from the check pilot. So they're expecting you to do the work and hand them someone who is going to be able to get through and do all the maneuvers. They don't, they don't want to find out that they have no idea what the FAST website looks like or a practical test guide even is. So that's your responsibility. And I want you to understand that we are empowering you to say no. Like Nancy Reagan, just say no. Say no, that's your job. When you're a flight lead or someone's asking you for an FPR or asking you to do a rec ride for them, if they're not ready, you have the responsibility and the right, and we will back you up, and Jeff certainly will. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Jeff for closing comments. Any more questions? We'll stay on.
I have one
question.
I have one situation that came up not too long ago that I just wanted to throw out to the group and see what your read on it is. And that is to be an instructor pilot in an aircraft which you are not qualified in, i.e.
let's say it's a T6 or a T28 or some other kind of aircraft, maybe not multi-engine, but certainly single engine, different performance, different characteristics. What's everybody's feeling about somebody inviting you to a clinic and saying, please come to my clinic, we're a little short on leads, and oh, by the way, you're going to be flying this or flying that. Just wanted to throw that out and see what people thought about it.
That's a great topic. And interestingly enough, the last meeting, there was a lot of consternation about dissimilar aircraft and side-by-sides, cabin class airplanes. It was quite a lengthy discussion. We'll talk, at length about that amongst the Standardization Advisory Committee going forward. I would really encourage, common sense prevails here. If you've never flown in a T6 before, are you going to be pilot in command? No. The guy that's actually owns the airplane is flying the airplane. Do you have to know how to land a T6? Well, probably not, but it might be a good idea. And I would strongly encourage you to at least get some stick time in the airplane and go out and fly a formation routine, a proficiency sortie in that airplane before you instruct in it. I can tell you that the T6 is probably one of the hardest formation airplanes there is to fly because it has so much momentum and so little power. And it's a hard animal. Can you go safely instruct in it without having some experience in it? That is going to be up to you and each individual pilot. But like Gil said, just because we can do something doesn't mean we should do something. Please, I encourage you to use your safety hat, put that safety hat on, do it, doing a reasonability check on it. A T-28, yeah, it'd be a blast to go fly with a guy, but man, you know what? I'm not the guy to do that. Because I've never flown a T-28 before. I'm not sure that's a good idea to go teach in formation in that without some experience. Everybody agree with that?
No.
I see lots of head nods. That's a good thing. Anybody else?
I got a question, Don Ram. What's RPA's position on formation takeoffs and landings?
Formation takeoffs and landings. We are developing requirements as we speak going forward for the wreck and check ride. I think the way it will end up, it has not been finalized, but I think that we have determined that an element approach is a very important required maneuver. Whether it ends up in a landing is going to be optional. But there are several situations, emergency procedures, where it's important for a guy to be able to lead back an emergency airplane and drop him off in the flare. So I anticipate that we will keep the requirement to do an element approach, but the element landing will be optional.
I think that you need to be really careful with that because we have some dissimilar airplanes, and if you have an emergency aircraft that needs to come back and the person that's bringing them back is not familiar with how that aircraft is going to settle decel, it could get really dangerous, especially getting down low. So I agree that that's a good idea to be able to bring somebody back, especially if they're Nordo or something like that. But if it's hot and you're at a high altitude, you got a high altitude density or anything like that, and you got a CJ that's coming back with an epsilon in tow, and he starts to decelerate toward gear speed, he's going to have that epsilon fall out of the sky, or he's going to go blowing by him because the epsilon is not going to be able to stick with him, especially if the epsilon can't put the flaps down. Same thing with T-34s. They can't go slow when it's hot, and they can't get the flaps down. So if they have an electrical issue or a hydraulic issue, then it's going to be kind of ugly if they're not prepared for that. So I think that there needs to be some vetting, I guess, is what we're looking at.
I think that's great. But I will say that a lead should be familiar with every airplane in his formation. And if he's not familiar with every airplane in his formation and their characteristics, even in emergency situations, they should be before they go fly with those aircraft. Yes, if I'm going to go fly with a T-34, fortunately, I've got some experience with T-34s. I know they're all electrical, and maybe they got to crank the gear down, all those kinds of things. Yes, that's definitely part of the discussion when we talk about training with dissimilar aircraft. And I appreciate you bringing that up. That's a really excellent point.
So, Jeff, rec ride, check ride, FPRs, formation takeoff, not a requirement. Yeah.
For the FPR, it says element takeoff or single ship takeoff. It's up to the guy that's.
And I think it's going to be that in the rec and check ride as well, right, Jeff? It's going to be at the option of the check pilot.
I believe so. That's where we're headed.
The option of the check pilot or the option of the check E. Some people do not want to do formation takeoffs for engine issues, if not accident avoidance.
It'll be up to the check pilot. And of course, they'll consider the safety, and if the guy's having an issue with it, then that'll be a consideration, but it'll be up to the check pilot. What else? Anybody? Well, I will second what Gil said about the lift knee board. That, I mean, they're $50, so this is kind of a good deal. It's certainly worth putting a critique in, please. I appreciate it. It's a great knee board. They fit an iPad mini, which is a wonderful thing. Fits it perfectly. So I think it's a great thing that we were able to get 10 of these knee boards to be able to hand out to our lead pilots. If anything, if you got questions or anything going on that you don't want to bring up now, please feel free to contact me at any point. And we really appreciate you taking the time and the dedication to do this for us.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everybody. Happy holidays. Talk to you soon.
See you guys. Fly safe.
And oh, by the way, before you go, I emailed all lead pilots a link to the survey. So look forward to your email from the RPA.